Hey folks, welcome back to session number 4 out of our 8 sessions together on Network Plus. My name is Dan, and we're going to be closing in on about the halfway mark for the course. And today's discussion will start off with a pretty brief section on small office, home office, network devices, the broadband connectivity that is likely to be our internet selection options, how we manage those routers, and then we're going to move into a big topic for networking in general, and it is IP addressing and subnetting. And I don't want anybody's blood pressure to rise just yet. I would actually say that subnetting is not a make or break for your exam success. There's a smaller number of questions than you would think that are on the exam for Network Plus, but we're going to do a thorough job in getting you ready for the Network Plus exam for subnetting and real-world subnetting, especially if you're going to go deeper into networking like the CCNA. Okay, so with that said, let's get started, and we want to get into our remote offices and what goes on in a remote office or our homes. What kind of internet connectivity do you have? What have you chosen as your internet option? I recently switched to having both broadband cable and broadband DSL. There's pros and cons to each of them. I don't have fiber availability in my neighborhood just yet. I've been checking. So Iris says fiber, Frank fiber, Vin says DSL, Fios, Starlink. Awesome. Okay. That's great, Guy. We're going to see Starlink on a slide, and I'm sure that other people would love to hear your experience with Starlink. My sister uses it for one of her remote, her getaway home, and it works pretty well. There are some nuances to it, though. There are definitely some nuances. Okay, interesting, Guy. So, Broadband Technologies, we're really not going to talk about fiber optic to the home, interestingly enough. And I think that might be a miss for CompTIA, but when we have fiber optic to the home, it's not really that much different, except you're likely to be able to get better connectivity, better speeds. But you know what? You can get really good speeds with DSL and cable. So let's start with a discussion of digital subscriber line. Digital subscriber line, DSL. So what do we need to know about this? We need to know that it is going to come in from our telco provider. Our traditional telephone line is capable of bringing this in, and it's a lot better network connectivity than what it replaced, which was regular asynchronous modems, dial-up modems, if you will. So DSL has a variety of different speeds. You're not actually responsible for much about this. What I want you to know, though, is the connection that it uses. What is the connection? What is this jack? Now, this is a little bit of a trick question in this course, because you could definitely get this wrong in this course. What jack is this? It's kind of strange. It's kind of like saying, hey, you know, it's an 8-track. It's the 8-track of the connection world. It's an RJ11 jack. It's kind of the precursor to RJ45 that we use in Ethernet. And I actually had to do a double take the last time I looked at one. I'm like, oh yeah, these. I'm just so used to working on RJ45. It's crazy. Okay, so you can see some connection speeds. The takeaway there is that the majority of the connection speeds that are available in DSL are asymmetric. And asymmetry in this case means you're going to be able to download more than you can upload. They essentially are allocating sections of the frequencies and channels, and they're saying the preponderance of traditional usage is in the downloads, so they allocate more resources, frequency resources, to be able to shift that so you have better connectivity, because it's a trade-off. They're just doing the trade-off. There are symmetric varieties that are out there. And by the way, you might be choosing a DSL connection option for maybe the backup internet for one of your, maybe a small branch office. You're like, we've got fiber, but I do want to just make sure that if they truly go dark on fiber, that we have some sort of internet connectivity. And the symmetric DSL traditionally is more appropriate for business usage. And I say it's more traditional or more appropriate, but choose the best connection that gives you the best speed for the need that you have. Okay? So the way that this works is there's the backbone that all service providers are going to have. It's probably technologies that are fiber optic based. They might use MPLS, which we're going to see at the very end of this to make sure that they can handle the packet delivery that they're going to need to. But you're going to connect up to what is called a DSL access multiplexer, and all of the phone lines essentially are going to terminate at this DSLAM, and that connection across from us to them is dedicated. It is not shared, and so you don't have as much contention. You don't have as much, it has many challenges with neighborhood usage crushing your connectivity. And I've actually seen that firsthand in the Phoenix Metro, where I live. Our internet broadband for cable is oversubscribed. And you can tell at certain times of the day that the connectivity that you really should get, you're not getting. And it's a really big issue, and it's hard to deal with it. Okay, it's you can call up your service provider as much as you want, but you're at their whim. You're at their beck and call. Okay, so DSL, digital subscriber line, super good service. Super good service. Thanks for that chat, Ira. Cable is our next option here. Broadband cable. That is going to adhere to a standard called DOCSIS. And again, really, what are we actually responsible for here? We're responsible for what kind of connection that we're going to have that is going to come into our home, that is going to be used for the broadband cable internet connectivity. And the name of this is on screen. The name of that connection is on screen. And it's not a cable that you hear about a lot. It's an RG6 cable that is terminated with an F connection or an F-type connection. Fine to say it either way. F. It's kind of weird, right? We don't hear that term a lot, but I would want you to think, hey, this is what we used to plug into our TVs to get cable telephone service or cable television service, right? And it is also going to go into a modem. Some people might struggle with the term. Are we using modem correctly here? Is the term modem accurate? And the answer is yes. Whether it be the traditional old style dial-up modems or DSL modems or cable modems, they all are modems, which is something that modulates and demodulates an analog signal. So it is actually accurate, but they're different flavors. They have to modulate different signals. So we buy our cable modem, and it's fine to get this external, but a lot of broadband routers have this integrated into the chassis. And there's pros and cons. Some people are gonna do all in one, and then some people are going to have it be external. One thing that I'll say is these things do fail. That's the real world experience that I can tell you. Don't expect these to live for 10 years. If you're getting 3 years out of a cable modem, you're doing pretty well. It's kind of like they don't make them like they used to. They don't make them like they used to. And I'm not beating up any particular vendor there. I've had a lot of different vendors. I think Aris, Motorola, and I just... first thing that I do when things start to go sideways on my broadband cable is I replace the modem. And so don't be resistant to that. And Vin says you can buy cable modems rather than rent. Yeah. So you can go out there, buy your own. You have to coordinate with your service provider. They actually can recognize what you're connecting up. They're not oblivious to what you connect up. They know exactly. But you can rent or you can buy. Usually it's more cost effective to buy it yourself. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So Guy was saying that he uses Starlink, and that is one of our options with respect to internet connectivity. And I'll tell you what, this is a really interesting beast. Now, we know that our skies are now filled with Starlink satellites. We launch, or at least Elon Musk launches lots and lots of these. What's nice about Starlink is that it is low Earth orbit satellites, which is very, very different than satellites that are going to be providing things like your direct TV if you're in the United States. So they're closer and they are really densely stacked in orbit. And they kind of mesh the connectivity. They are able to talk to one another. And the nice thing about Starlink is it gives you pretty good latency and pretty good speed. But you are kind of in a grid sharing connectivity in your zip code, if you will. And some zip codes might be more sort of oversubscribed than others. Frank, Guy, is that what you think is going on for your environment? HughesNet is also something that is out there. I don't want to, demean HughesNet, but it's kind of a pretty old generation of satellite connectivity. Now, here's why we would consider this. Here's why we would consider satellite. No, wait a minute. Why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell us when you'd consider satellite? This is actually what you want to know. You want to be pragmatic as somebody in the IT space. You got to be solution driven. You have to solve challenges. And Ira chatting in, Vin saying rural, remote. Absolutely. It's all about, and my parents moved to a place that was super rural. They didn't have Starlink. We had to bring in a T1 connection, cost like $500 a month, and it was terrible connectivity. You do what you got to do to get connectivity to that place. You do what you have to do. And so if DSL and cable aren't an option and fiber isn't an option, and you still might want to check for some other sort of oddball. There's Wi-Fi startup companies that get connectivity that can provide service to an area. Depends on your locale, depends on your city. But if I've exhausted fiber, DSL, cable, and mom and pop shop internet connections, I'm definitely going to be thinking about Starlink, and I might think about Starlink above some of those. Yeah. HughesNet, because you're using basically direct TVs, satellites, they have a few different satellites. They're pretty far away. There's a lot of contention because they have a very small number of satellites. pretty pretty high latency. But again, you do what you got to do. There are some people who can't even use any of these that might have to use like microwave, and you're in a really remote location. Okay. I'm looking forward to when Starlink, you can mount it on, your RV, and you can, but at least last time I checked, they didn't want you to move where you were. They expect you to be in a certain geographic location. Now, sometimes in networking, we like to throw out terms. And we don't like to define them. This is one of those times that I'd like to define a term that you're going to hear thrown around by IT people that will casually speak about things. And the term is called a demarc. A demarcation point is a line in the sand. Now, the line in the sand of a demarc is variable depending on you and your service provider. So it might be R1 could actually be their router, okay? And they would actually, that would be the far side of the demarc. So the demarc could be actually moved, okay? Or it could be, where the telephone line, comes into your building, okay? And the demarcation is where the responsibilities for a challenge are going to be. So when we are in IT, we actually have to read the fine print of our service providers, okay? And the demarcation point will be defined, and it'll tell you things like who's responsible for fixing what. On your side of the demarc, that's going to be yours to fix. On their side of the demarc, that's going to be theirs to fix. And then there's a service level agreement, typically, that tells you, hey, here's how quickly we will get that back up and running for you. So, demarc, don't get thrown off by it. It's just that here's who's got to fix it line. And it might be like we could bring in the cable into our, one of our service provider routers. The top of rack device here could be a service provider router, and then they provide a handoff. Or this could be in, the distribution room for our office and shared. That might be their demarc too. Okay.